You good?
Where's the flag?
Right here.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hey, Pat, Jack Collins late. He's had some issues, so he will be late.
Well, Chief's not coming till 9:15, so
We've got other stuff to cover. So
Jack Collins late.
Well, we left off at tennis. Right?
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Go! Hey! Let's get that one.
nice.
get that correct.
Correct.
All right, let me go a few tabs up. Okay, tennis.
That felt good.
Tennis, anyone?
Let's not do that again.
It'll stop hurting my fingers. All right. We have our tennis budget. Sorry, I had always geared up for the police. So with tennis, come back. All right, tennis. We had a decrease in revenue in the tennis area. There were no payroll, no significant changes in payroll or contract services for the year. Capital items were relatively minimal. We do have repainting of repaint of courts, which is something we said once we put new courts in, we'd be painting them. We did put a portion of the rec track program. I'm sorry, page 4 with tennis. The bottom of it, the rec track program, there's $1,000. That's a portion of it that'll be used to, if you recall, we talked a lot yesterday with the Rec and Parks, their new program, that software program. Rec Track's the name of that program. So we just put a small portion, just proportion part of it there, because we'll be using that in that area as well. We have also, when it comes to tennis, the other thing I want to point out to you is sprinkler head replacement. Notice it's reserve replacement, but the important thing to know there, working with the tennis folks and doing evaluation on the problems they've had with the sprinkler system over there. We tried one court this fall and replaced all of the sprinkler heads on the one court, and their advice was to go with a high sprinkler head, just completely different than what we had been going before, and they apparently worked very well, put the water where we needed it, the way they needed it, and they were able to control them better. So this replacement there is to kind of upgrade all the sprinkler head and a couple of the controls.
Is this just under tennis? It's not
Yes, it's just under tennis right now.
So
that's where we are for tennis.
Anybody got any comment?
Yeah, hang on.
Yes,
Yeah.
tennis.
Hang on. Luckily, that's Jack. I don't work there anymore. You fired me from that job.
Now,
I know. I understand.
Forethought, that's right.
What happened to the revenues? I mean, if
Yeah, I
it
saw
was
that
at 40
question.
grand all along, and then all of a sudden it's down to they're losing.
No, revenues, if you just go to page 1 in the budget book,
Right.
You can see revenues in that particular area have continued to be in a downward trend. I think part of the trending of it is folks tend to be moving towards some of the tennis community as a whole doesn't appear to be growing as much as it did at the inception years ago. So it's a little bit of a slide. It's been on a constant slide. Fortunately, Platform and Pickle are starting to, I believe, see some of the benefits because they're not as hard on the joints and the knees, and you don't quite have as large a court to play on. Actually, Tom Herrick's more familiar with the playability of all three sports. I mean, would you say that's kind of an accurate reason why that's probably you're getting a decline?
Yeah.
What's it?
Tennis players are aging out. They're getting older, and they're not bringing in,
Like,
So I mean, it's been trending in that. I mean, it's not new. It's been trending in that direction.
Okay. Yeah. For the last 5 years.
Millennials only care about their cell.
What's that?
I said millennials only care about their cell phones.
That's true. All right. With everyone's permission, we'll go to the platform. Decrease in revenue here, not as dramatic. And in addition to that, there were no significant payroll changes or contract services changes in this area, weren't you? Didn't see anything significant. We do have some resurfacing of ports. Ports 1 and 2 are due resurfacing, and we've budgeted to do so. And we got, Sonia and I were talking about this, we got a little out of sync resurfacing of the ports 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. Now we're trying to get back on it. We're getting on more of a rhythm to get them so they don't have, some of them had cracks and some other things. We recognize we have to get on a more proactive approach to the resurfacing ports there, just to keep them in good condition. Any questions on comments, concerns? Again, and we'll hit pickle. That should cover all the platform areas, or all the racket sports. Okay, last one being pickle. There was, again, a slight decrease here in the revenue. No significant change in payroll or contract services. They've been a little more consistent over the last couple years since we've been tracking it, but it's only been a couple years, so it's hard to show a trend in any event. We have seen more players in participation there. And I've also got fence, guard, windscreens, tables, chairs, those items all in there. Awnings, we're all in the capital budget tonight. Again, nothing very significant in these. Anything on any of the rackets?
No, it's an eliminate. No, I'm talking about $11,000 for niceties. What was it? We don't know where that was.
I'm assuming you're referring to the page 4, maybe? The awnings, the fence guard, the windscreens, tables and chairs. I mean, you need the fence guard. You have to put over the edging of the fence. Windscreens you need. Part of the playability, tables and chairs that folks sit around. What's that? No, these are for the new courts.
It's a new course.
Right. New
You
courts
know,
are in this year's budget.
The only thing I want to mention, it may not be so much in this tab,
Right.
but membership itself mentioned maybe going up. Now, I saw the membership. 2015, we had 101 memberships, pickleball. 2016 shows 73. Associate membership dropped 28 to 9. Individuals 42 to 37. Family 31 to 24. Yet the projection for 2017 shows almost a 30% increase. And the trend 15 to 16 was down. And I'm wondering, how do they project so many new memberships 2017?
The anticipation is actually having the courts in place, the new courts in place, which gives them the ability to play anytime on the court. That was part of the process of the new courts.
Courts were available this year for playoff also, correct?
Yeah, but they were sharing courts with, it was a shared with the tenants, and then we painted some of them, and then we painted a couple more. There's been a lot of back and forth. Well, you know, I mean, it's been brought up at the...
I just don't understand such a big increase in membership. Membership trend was actually down here.
Well, you notice we showed our revenues down. So we recognize there's a slight downturn in revenues on it. But it's only a couple grand. Again, it's not one of the bigger tabs in the book. So, you know, we took, we looked at where it was and we brought it down a little in the overall revenue to the budget versus actual.
Okay.
So we're with you. I mean, that's why we brought down a couple grand. All right. So now the next item, what's that?
Bob, I'm sorry, I apologize. What's the status right now of the pickleball courts?
I'll give an updated board meeting next week. We had some. We only had single bidder come in for the entire project, which is not enough to bring it forward for an action item. So we're trying to look at it from a different perspective, see if we can approach it with a phased in with the project.
What was the cost of the same?
I didn't bring that documentation with me.
Within 100,000.
You know what?
I don't know what it was.
I think
Why do you think I know what it was?
the entire community knows what it was.
Do you know what it was?
It came in around 700,000 as a rough estimate.
Okay. Simple answer, simple question.
So, all right. So, with everyone's permission, we're going to go back to the police department, which was tab 12. As we said yesterday, we started down the discussion on the police department, and we had some questions arise. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reset it a little bit, and I asked the chief to come in and share his valuable input, which is interesting, which you all may not know. The chief's experience isn't just here in Ocean Pines. He actually was the chief of police in Ocean City. So you all were talking about trends and things happening in Ocean City. He brings experience from both sides of the house, fortunately, to the community. So when we're looking at trending and where we believe we need the officers and under what conditions, I think it's more appropriate for him to speak on those topics and maybe give you more direct answers. So, Chief.
Thank you. Good morning. I know there's some concerns about our additional officer. I hope I can allay those fears. If some of the concerns would probably go around the supervision of our officer by the sheriff's department, there's some concern. There's concerns about how much time our officer would spend in Ocean Pines since we're paying an Ocean Pines police officer. I know there's some concerns about staffing. What would happen if we needed an officer in Ocean Pines because of turnover or illness or disability? Could we still have that officer work our community? I know there's also some concerns about the money spent for the officer and the forfeiture money, which is, to be quite frank, forfeiture money is hard to predict. It could be a lot of money. It could be a smaller amount, and they vary from year. It's hard to predict that because, crime's not always totally predictable. It runs in trends also. I do have some experience with task forces. As an Ocean City Police Chief, we were in the County Narcotics Task Force the entire tenure of my time in Ocean City, so I realize that. At task forces, we have to be honest, task forces are cooperative efforts by police departments to address regional problems. Drugs don't start and end in Ocean Pines. I wish they did. We could really control it very strongly then. But our drugs are coming in from Delaware and Philadelphia and Baltimore and in large metro areas. Drugs aren't manufactured in Ocean Pines. They come into Ocean Pines. We have to deal with that. We have to deal with realities of drugs. What we found in Ocean City was narcotics was a regional problem. There wasn't many open-air drug dealers in Ocean City or Ocean Pines, and it came in and was critical. We participated in the countywide drug task force. And task forces are information sharing. It's police sitting around a room, the Ocean City officer, the Ocean Pines officer, the Berlin officer, the state police officer, and they come up with information, bits of information, and they share that. If a case arises in Ocean City and the drug dealer lives in Ocean Pines, then we share that information, and we have a lot of internal information about that individual in our community. We are the experts about Ocean Pines. We know the bad guys. We know where they live. We know where our prior contacts with them, and it facilitates knowing where, when, whether that dealer lives in Ocean Pines, whether someone from Ocean City is dealing into Ocean Pines, or Berlin, or Pocomoke, or wherever. It's a regional problem. It's not, I would love to think that we could contain everything within Ocean Pines, but narcotics, and we do our criminal investigations, our detectives work exclusively on our cases. They don't work any other cases in here. Now, they cooperate with other agencies as we have common suspects, but they don't do the narcotics work. And what we uncover, we work on. But most of our problems with narcotics are coming into our community. What are the benefits of joining a task force? Well, our officer would primarily be assigned to Ocean Pines and Ocean Pines cases. Now, not every case starts and ends in Ocean Pines. So if you had to go outside Ocean Pines to work a case that originated in Ocean Pines, we would do so. It's just, good police work. But our officer is the expert. Right now, any information about our people within Ocean Pines comes into Ocean Pines. Yes, our sheriff's department would supervise it. It's a multi-jurisdictional police task force with statewide federal authority. We don't have statewide or federal authority right now. Our officer would now be able to access DEA databases and Homeland Security databases we don't currently have access to, since we currently have limited authority. We really don't have any arrest authority outside Ocean Pines except cases, fresh pursuit, cases that started in Ocean Pines and we pursued them out in the county. But we don't have any authority to go out and make arrests in Berlin if our drug dealers So in a major investigation, it's critical that we work with another agency. And the beauty of having one unifying department, such as the Sheriff's Department, is there's unity of command. There's one voice that speaks for the investigation. It's not Ocean Pines says this, the county says that, Ocean City says this, Berlin says that. There's one voice that unifies it all and works across our border and into Ocean Pines. I have a very close personal relationship with Sheriff Mason. We were both Ocean City officers together. He was my sergeant. I was his corporal. We were on the same shift. I can speak to him man to man at any time. And Sheriff Mason assures us that our officer will be available for redeployment in Ocean Pines whenever we need him. In other words, if we're shorthanded by attrition or injury, we can redeploy that officer in uniform in our community. So he assures me that we have that capability. It's not that they're forever gone and we have no access to that officer. He will report to us for payroll, and he will inform me and my detective lieutenant of all major cases originating and what's going on in the task force at Ocean Pines. So we will keep our hands in the criminal assignment. And I think it's very important to understand that this assignment's not a one-way street. The task force is going to provide a vehicle, office space, computers, cell phones, and access to sophisticated equipment that we currently don't have access to. Forfeiture money will be equitably shared about all members that are actively in the task force, meaning that it doesn't matter if there's a major drug bust in Pocomoke, it's equitably shared. If there's 4 people from 4 different jurisdictions, it's shared 4 ways. If it's $100,000 on a 113 traffic stop for a drug dealer that has carrying $100,000, that will be equitably shared with our member. So that's important to know. And again, in the same thing, equitable sharing, I can't predict. I mean, it may be this year $700,000 the task force seized. Next year it could be $100,000. And it takes time to get forfeiture monies. It could literally take years. But I don't anticipate an initial rush of money. But down the road, I do think that participating in this task force will defer some of the money that we have to spend to put this officer in there. And again, about services coming in from the county, I know that's a concern. Understand that the Sheriff's Department right now is serving all civil and legal proceedings within Ocean Pines, meaning any arrest summonses to court, they serve them. It frees our officers. There's a lot of every case that we make an arrest that we have witness summons, we don't serve them. The Sheriff's Department comes in and serves them within our community. All civil processes served within here. County also maintains our whole computer system, our records management system, our computer-aided dispatch system. They run it, they monitor it, they provide security for it. It's an expense we don't have to provide. And they also come in here when we need them. Mutual aid is a two-way street. There are times, yes, that out on the 589 corridor, the Sheriff's Department will ask us to handle the call. But there is also times when we're shorthanded, when we may only have one officer working due to illness, training, or being shorthanded, and the Sheriff's Department will come in and back up our officers. Just the other day, 2 sheriff's deputies came in and backed up one of our officers on a case where a man was threatening to kill his wife with a shotgun. And 2 Sheriff's Department's deputies came in with our officer, and it was peacefully resolved. Now, it's in police work, you know about officer safety. It's critical to know that an officer has a backup from the Sheriff's Department, the state police is critical. We support them, they support us. It's one service that requires complete cooperation because people's lives are on the line, not just the police officer, but the citizens within the community. And we provide that service. And again, our drugs don't start in Ocean Pines. They come into Ocean Pines. That's the beauty of the task force, is we're all sitting in the same building, and the Sheriff's Department will maintain that building. And they're talking to one another. They're sharing information. Hey, little Billy was dealing drugs in Ocean City. Oh, yeah, he lives in Ocean Pines. Maybe we should watch him because he's probably dealing in Ocean Pines. And by the same thing, any of our officers discovering information about possible drug use in Ocean City may have something connected to Berlin. It may have something connected to West Ocean City. It may have something connected to Ocean City. So it's critical that we share that information and be on the same page. We don't have a facility for that. County does. They have computers. They have the sophisticated equipment that we don't have. And having everyone in the same room is critical. Again, I will say that, we're seeing in 2015 the rise of heroin abuse. I've talked about statistics. We've had 5 that died, 10 that nearly died. We, as police officers, saved 2 individuals from a death with Narcan naloxone. And what we're seeing now is a lot of heroin addicts or drug addicts are committing crimes within their own community. Just yesterday, someone walked in the Ocean Pines Police Department and said $6,000 was stolen. My checkbooks were stolen by my son, who's a drug addict. So we're now investigating that, and we anticipate having an arrest shortly on that case. So heroin abuse doesn't just affect poor families. It cuts across all economic standards. Good parents. All you have to do is ask some of our kids that go to a local high school if they have access to drugs. They'll tell you they know where to get it. They know how to get it. As I told the Budget Finance Committee, we haven't had an additional officer in 10 years. And we actually lost our animal control officer. So if you looked at the numbers are pretty flat over the years. Anyone who knows me and knows me from Ocean City knows I don't come into an elected official because I know you have to manage your plan. I know you have to go back to our citizens and say, why did we increase assessments or in Ocean City, why the property taxes? And I don't come in unless I really believe sincerely that it's something that's necessary for our community. I've been in law enforcement for 41 years, 25 of which is chief of police in a large agency and a small agency. And I don't ask for something that I think is unnecessary. I ask for what I believe is in best interest long term for our community. And I really believe with the trend in heroin, the trend in drugs today, that we need to get on top of this early or else we're going to suffer the effects long term. And I think working with our Sheriff's Department, the state police, and the members of the task force will be a more efficient drug investigation organization, and we will proactively help deter some of the drug dealing that is occurring in Ocean Pines right now. So I appreciate everything you do. I don't ask lightly. If you look at my track record, I haven't come back every year and asked for another officer. I only ask when I absolutely think it's necessary because I know you have to go back versus justify an increase. But I do believe in this case that it is absolutely necessary. Any questions you have, I'll be glad to answer.
Can you tell me how many officers are currently assigned to that task force?
Let's see. State police, I think there's 6. I'm not sure the exact number.
Officers assigned?
I'm sorry?
What department has the most officers assigned to that task
The Sheriff's Department.
force?
I'm thinking 3, but I'm guessing. I don't know the exact
And
numbers.
Who else is part? It's the state.
Yeah, state
Sheriff.
police, sheriff's department, Ocean City, it'd be ourselves. We're not in the criminal investigation. The county also has a criminal task force. We're not in that. We do our own criminal investigations. So that relieves us from that. But Berlin has 2 officers in the criminal investigation side of it. Pocomoke also has an officer, or had an officer in the criminal side.
Who's responsible for the overtime?
We would be, but
We would be?
with limits. The sheriff's department and the sheriffs assured me that they would put limits on the overtime that would be accrued, and they would let our officer off if they accrue a certain number of hours. So it will be monitored by us, and they will report to us for payroll, so we will know exactly how many hours they're working. And if we decide that they've worked too many hours, we will put them off.
You said something that I guess I missed earlier. You said the criminals. Could you tell me just a little bit the structure? There's apparently 2 sides.
Yes, the county has a county bureau of investigation that work predominantly criminal cases. They also have what they call a criminal enforcement team, which is largely a narcotics task force. And various departments participate in whichever end you have. When I was in Ocean City, we did our own criminal investigations, but we also were in the county narcotics task force. That's similar to what we do here. We will do our own criminal investigations, and then we will have an officer that coordinates our drug investigations and provides that, because they overlap. A lot of times, like I said, heroin addicts are committing thefts, burglaries. We'll arrest them, but the greater drug dealing part of it may leak out into the county, and usually does. Sir.
Will this position be filled by someone that's already on the department now and bring some?
Yes, sir. That's what we would do. We'd have an experienced officer go into the task force, and the task force will provide all training that's required. That will not cost us anything. And then some of those schools, like re-interrogation school, are quite expensive, so that would pay him for advanced training. Our officer, when he or she eventually comes back to the department, will be a better officer, because they'll be trained in narcotics.
Chief,
Yes.
it was brought up by somebody who knows a heck of a lot more about this stuff than I do, that the recoveries that you get in arresting these criminals or these users or these dealers, it is very difficult to get that recovery back. Do you expect any kind of payback for using our patrolman or our patrol lady into that particular?
Payback, you mean forfeitures?
Yes.
Again, it's hard to predict. I can tell you that last year, 2015, the Narcotics Task Force.
Say that again.
Last year, they recovered $700,000. Now, it takes literally years with forfeitures. Because what happens is it has to go through federal, it has to go through state, and then, of course, the attorneys get involved and things are postponed. So it literally takes years. I'm not going to sit here and tell you instantaneous money. But down there, when you make enough cases, there's always some after you start stacking that come back. So it will take years. I'm being quite frank.
Appreciate that.
17,000, you said?
No, 700,000.
700,000.
Ocean City just recovered 70,000 cases that were result. No, I'm not.
How many years old? Chief?
It's several years.
Several years.
Exactly.
So right now it's the state police, Ocean City, and the sheriff. Isn't it?
Yeah. Well, those also Homeland Security and Drug Enforcement Administration have representatives also. So it's a wide-ranging task force that crosses state lines. You know, like I said, we have no authority outside Ocean Pines. We have no authority in Delaware. A lot of what our investigations for drug lead up into Delaware right now. That's a fact.
Did you mention before they have representatives from Berlin, Polk City?
Yes, but they're the criminal part of the task
They're the
force.
criminal part.
We'd be in the drug part of the task force.
Gotcha.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a number of questions. Because you have no arrest authority outside of Ocean Pines, that precludes you from having access to certain databases. What database is that?
Be Homeland Security and Drug Enforcement Administration that have representatives, because it's regional authority. It would give our officer the ability to have statewide authority and some federal to work investigations.
But you have access though to like JIS and CGIS and all that now.
Yes. Yes.
So this is
Yeah, it's just additional databases that we don't have access to. We have some that we're access to criminal history information across national region. We don't have some of the drug databases.
You also indicated that this will give you access to different types of equipment that you don't currently have. What would that be?
Luma law, crime scene detection, wiretapping equipment, some electronic wires that our officers could make drug deals. We don't have the sophisticated electronics.
And is that largely because, as you mentioned, that it's not initiating notion, right?
Right.
People bringing it in.
Right. Right now, we're beholden to the county.
I believe you said that the task force would be providing space,
Yes.
and so where would that be? This officer.
Our director over here is asking you to speak up so people are on the TV.
We can't hear you.
He's waving at you, but you didn't see it.
Oh, no.
It's out in the county right now.
Somebody come up to see if you can hear you. I couldn't hardly hear you.
It's out in the county right now. I prefer not to say where they are.
Fair enough. I try.
There's county offices out.
Okay. And so the person is not going to have any requirements or anything that we would have to pay for here in Ocean.
Other than salary and benefits, that's correct.
Oh, I was curious when you said that sometimes the sheriff will ask you to handle something out on 589.
Yes.
What would we be able to do if we don't have authority outside of Ocean?
That's under mutual aid. It gives us authority. We have to be asked to have authority. So what happens is they will say, we need you in the county, and under a mutual aid agreement, it gives us authority when asked out of the county. We have no traffic authority out in the county. We have criminal arrest powers out in the county. When asked, we handle calls. But we don't have any inherent power. Maybe I should have put it that way. We don't have any inherent authority out there without being asked to.
What's the length of time do you project this would stay in? Obviously a year, but is there a window of expectation here of how long this will last?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
How long the task force is going to last?
It's been there since 1989,
So it's permanent.
so it's permanent.
Okay.
But we have the ability to pull out at any time.
Yes.
You know, here's another way of looking at this. Is there any negative downside to you as police chief and to the force and to Ocean Pines other than, the introduction of drugs by not participating in this program?
Yes, because we're reactive right now. In other words, we have a problem, we go to it. We don't know everything that's going on in our community. And in other words, what Ocean City's working, what Berlin's working. Maybe we have the same drug dealer. Maybe we have the same person right now. And by having everybody in the same room and sharing that information, we get a better handle on what's going on. I can give you a case a few years ago where we got an alarm call and went to a house, and we found that the homeowner had been growing marijuana plants and had like 100 plants in the house. He'd alarmed his own house. We wouldn't know that drug dealer had 100 plants in his house. Because unless that alarm went off, foolishly, they alarmed his own house. We went there and looked in the window and saw all the drugs. So, I mean, in those kinds of cases, we discover inadvertently some drugs. And then when there's minor cases that are within our people, we know we do investigate them. But the higher level cases, the major distribution, we're really cut off. And we need to get involved in those.
Let me make sure I understand. In this particular case with the guy growing plants, was he under investigation by this task force or by any other jurisdiction surrounding Ocean Pines?
I'm not aware of
Okay.
that, but I didn't have access to the case.
If he were under investigation, would you have knowledge of it?
Yes.
You would?
Yes.
Even though we don't have a member on that task force, you would have knowledge of it?
When
They
we
would
have
share
a
that.
member on the task force, I would know about it.
When?
If I have a member, I would
No,
not
no,
currently.
that's
Yes.
the essence of my question.
Yes, I would
If we
know.
do not have a person on this task force, and there is an individual within Ocean Pines who is being investigated by some other jurisdiction, will you have knowledge of that individual being in a suspicious situation? Will another jurisdiction identify that person to you so that you know what's going on
When
in our
we are in
community?
the task force, yes.
No, you're not in the task
No,
force.
no,
Outside of the task force.
we don't always now. It's a catch as catch can, meaning if they have to provide that information to us, we know it. If they don't, we don't.
Okay, if they have knowledge, you'll probably get the information, even though you're not involved in the task force.
No.
Possibility you will not.
Possible.
But if you are in the task force, you will get direct knowledge.
Yes, I will.
Got it.
I find it, I don't believe, I find it very difficult that somebody has information, another law enforcement agency has information about drug activity in Ocean Pines, specific activity in Ocean Pines, and they won't notify you.
No, it depends on where they are in their investigation, from and how high the investigation goes, whether it goes federal, state, and whether we're let in on the information when they believe we need to know about it. So right now, it could be withheld from us till the larger investigation is done and the warrants are served, or we get that information. This is a way we'll be in the beginning of the investigation rather than the end of the investigation. And it'll give us a better handle on what's going on in Ocean Pines. Major Ocean City case, they're not going to tell us initially until it gets to the point where we need to be an active participant. This will put us in right at the beginning so we know exactly what's going on, where it's going on, and where it may lead.
Any other questions for the chief? Thanks, chief.
Thank you.
Chief.
Thank you.
Attention on deck.
All right. Moving on to aquatics is our next amenity. Okay. Under the aquatics tab, which is tab 17.
Let's.
Look at Bill.
We have
cold.
We have revenue increase of 83,000. It's broken down under several categories: coupons, cash, swim classes, miscellaneous, along with food. So they're all the items that are impacted and had an impact to increase the revenue. Payroll, there's actually not a significant change in payroll. However, there is a change in a position within that department. We are requesting a full-time employee who's currently a part-time year-round employee. We'd like to change that to a full-time position. And I'm going to give you some more details on that momentarily. Chemicals, there were no significant change. Some supplies were up by 5,000. Insurance was up by 3. And the capital requests on page 4 are listed. The one new identified equipment we have in there are the AQUATICS bikes. The information for the bikes are actually at the back of that section. What they are is they're pretty much exercise bikes that are placed in the water, and you do your exercise in the water. We initially started looking at this. Some of the metropolitan areas actually have these exercise cycles, and they can't. When they have them and the classes are offered, there's a waiting list to participate, and some of the monies they charge at some of the metropolitan areas are extremely high for use of this. So what we did was went back and kind of looked at what cycling and spin classes in the area are like at regular gyms. And we also set out information on our AQUATICS Facebook page and had a great response to the potential new programming with the exercise bikes. From there, because we saw that there was a real desire to have it, we started to work up a schedule with potential classes, when they could be offered based on timing in the pool, when we would have access to it. So we developed a whole plan and schedule around that, and the plan would start in September to actually start to deploy these. With that being said, we believe the bikes will be paid for within the first year of operation just from the classes we can offer.
Due to be paid for within a year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they'll pay for themselves and then some, just based on the classes.
For classes.
Yeah, and we've actually, interestingly enough, a couple of things this targets for us. It targets a more active group. It brings a different dynamic to the pool. Our very, very early morning swim folks actually come in to swim laps as part of their exercise program. They're training for an event or some type of activity. This leads right into that, kind of the athletes in our area come in and do more training. It's a little more aggressive. It's a little younger focus. But again, when we went back and analyzed the scheduling, where we could fit it in, what the costs were, we felt very, very confident this would pay for itself. Would pay for itself within the year.
Have you and the manager determined the cost of the program? The exercise. What's? Do you have any idea what is it in here?
It's not in there.
Okay.
No, but the total amount of revenue is.
Well, the cost per.
Yeah,
I know some people may be interested. That's
no. Hang on. Classes would be dependent, and we have a couple different types of classes offered.
You got old people classes?
Yes. All people classes.
Is that Art that said yeah? I mean, look at that in your one year.
All right,
okay.
so classes range from approximately $85 a session, and that would be 12 classes, $85 a session for 9 people, as an example.
$85 for 12 sessions.
Okay. So we have, it's about the range where we feel that.
No.
No, it's actually
less than $8 a round.
If you look at the classes that you take, so like I take spin classes at some of at Powerhouse Gym as an example. If you pay for the classes, we're in line with that. If you pay for them individually as opposed to being part of the membership. So this is just adding another dynamic to the pool. The bikes are extremely light, and they don't stay in the pool. You drop them in when you want to use them, then you pull them out and stack them up. So we looked at that. We also went as far as calling one of the bike manufacturers to make sure we understood any maintenance concerns. Get something coming in and out of the water. The majority of the components were aluminum, so the water doesn't have the impact on them. Again, relatively modest program, but we did go as far as scheduling everything out on it to make sure we could do this, where we could fit it in. We actually had some local spin instructors already calling to interested in teaching the class. So it's interesting when we roll that out that we've already got some great feedback on it.
Just that number you quoted, is that a member's number? You are going to charge different prices.
There will be differential whether you're a member or non-member. This is just the basic class. I don't remember if I wrote it down as a member or non-member. I can certainly figure it out, but we will differentiate member-non, as we do with everything.
Bob, on the laptop area,
yes.
You've got a couple options there. I mean, could you flesh that out a little bit?
Which page?
It's page 101. It's in the capital area.
Yes, sir.
And it says
Page 4.
New laptops.
Yes.
And then when you go back, it says laptop 1, laptop 2, option 1.
Yeah,
option 2.
We always get options on those type of things. Yes. So we put in here some things we talked to. I think this was BDK we're working with on there as soon as I find it. BDK. So they give us some different options when we look at buying equipment based on what the use is going to be and what we think we need from the size of the hard drive, that type of thing.
So it has nothing to do with getting a Levino or getting a $2,900 computer versus a $1,700. Has nothing to do with that. The option. It's what we're talking about. Two computers. One is 29, one is 17. Correct?
Well, we always do. When we go to buy equipment, we always look at different options, figure out what's going to be the best equipment to meet our needs. And it's not always the most expensive. But part of this request, we always put a sample where we could order it. We don't bid it out at the time when we're doing this because we're a year away from it.
That's what I'm saying. I got two pictures of two different computers.
Yeah, just give
so from a planning board budget point of view, what we do is we approve 2,900, but you only spend 1,750. Should we be putting in 1,750 instead of 29?
Well, no. How are you going to know how much we're going to spend?
Well, the request,
it's a budget.
The request is for 29, and then on the Levino ThinkPad, 450. Okay. It says buy new, 1,098 up in the upper right-hand corner. And then the next one is a Levino ThinkPad, 14 inches, says 1,750.
They're examples. Every budget item we put in with a capital request, we try to put a sample. It's a ballpark. That's why it's called a budget. It's not exactly so. It's not here's what it's actually going to cost. Okay. It's a range, so you're aware of what we're looking at just as a sample. We're not saying definitively that's the unit we're going to buy. We'll price it out at the time that we go to buy it, and we may be buying them when we buy 2 or 3 other pieces of equipment, get even a better discount. Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's where it was.
Oh,
because,
yeah.
Because you got a computer just about for every group.
Yeah, so what we do, we try to do it in groups if we can, but I have to, for budgetary purposes, give you a range of what it potentially could be, so we put it in there just so you have an idea what we're looking at. But we've done that with everything.
The 250 for the full resurfacing.
Yes.
Is that a pretty hard number?
Don't know for sure. We've got the RFP, as you all know, are out. We told you they were going to be out, so as they start to come back in, we'll have a better feel. We use that based on the recent pool work we had, so we think it's close.
And that's going to include the repairs that you pointed out to us when we took the tour?
Yes, sir.
With the crack in the pool and all that stuff?
Absolutely.
Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah, so again, the RFP's out on it, and we'll just remember the schedule was to have it in the around July 10th time frame and open by September 10th. That's kind of our window.
Right.
Then when we put it out with the RFP, and we also when folks came to do the walkthrough, we talked to them about that.
I'll go back to the spin bikes for 2 issues. One, it says at the bottom for warranty, your instructor has to be certified.
Yeah, if spin class, you should be a certified instructor. Sure.
What is the process for getting?
I can't say definitively, Tom. It's with any exercise class. You have to be certified to teach.
Okay.
That's a normal.
That's all.
That's a norm. Yeah.
Well, Tom, are you asking if we're going to increase staff?
No, I'm just wondering what it takes to get certified to teach.
I mean, in other words, current staff is going to be certified?
No, some might. Our AQUATICS director is certified in spinning. So we already have at least one.
That answers my.
Yeah, I mean, we have certifications a lot different.
That's it.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm a little confused about the food sales numbers. They
Yeah.
don't appear until you get to 2016 budget, but this is supposed to be inclusive of all of it. So
The primary food sales there are a reflection of the sports court, swim and racket club pool. Remember when we put the snack bar back? Oh, I'm sorry. You may not be aware.
well, no, I understand that, but this tab says the information is inclusive of all of the foods.
We do have. We have
So-
light snack. We don't have service, but we have
For
candy
example,
bars and Gatorade.
you have lots of food at the beach club, for example. And that would have been prior to
The pool doesn't sell food. Beach Club. The Beach Club itself sells different than any of the other pools. We have a restaurant associated with the Beach Club.
Right.
So AQUATICS would not show revenue from food sales for Beach Club in this.
Okay, so you keep that separate and apart.
Because yes, ma'am.
And this is only reflective of the food sales now that exist at the sports, well, wherever.
Swim and racket. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, that was a little confusing to me. That's all.
No, that's what I'm saying. That's what I said. It's swim and racket related.
Okay. One other thing I see here on page 5 of their narrative.
Yes.
Threats for OPA Aquatics. We talk about the aging demographics of homeowners, but that's counter to what we were talking about yesterday.
No. It just because it's a threat doesn't mean it's the only thing. In other words, we recognize that we teach a lot of classes that are focused on the more the more mature citizen. Creaky joints class is an example. More mature. So we recognize that could be a challenge with offering those type of programs ongoing if people start, much like we're having the challenge at tennis, where they're starting to fade out a little bit, but they're migrating to the other two racket sports, just less movement. So we just let's say it's a potential something top of mind that we do. Our pool serves a large demographic of more mature citizens by some of the programming. So we just identified it just so we know. We're not saying the entire community. It's not fact. As we discussed yesterday, you're right.
I'm just curious about
Yes, sir.
the number of 21,000 for food sales. That's
Yes.
our forecast for the year.
Okay.
I think, I don't know, the November report, which I happen to have, I guess I sent it on here, shows sales of, actual sales of, so something like 8,900.
For the month? For the month, maybe?
Well,
We're over 8,000 in sales at Sports Club, or at Swim and Racket Club.
yeah, you are. A little over. Hang on a second. Exact number 8,900 and $63 year to date at the swimming racket club. I'm assuming that, by the time you get November, the sales they don't know. Yeah, they did stop zero sales in November. It's not open.
Yeah.
So, and it's not going to be open in April. And so, 8,963, I would think that's it. That's the number for the year. Okay, but forecast number here is 21,232. So,
We can certainly double check that.
okay. We have a schedule. There is a scheduled bridge.
They are. They're out there doing their thing now.
And it's, well,
So-
clubs are chatting. Exactly.
Other questions on aquatics? Other questions on aquatics? All right, what I'll ask is we have our guest from the fire department here for the 10 o'clock. That works. All right, staying right on schedule. We'll ask, hey, Billy, you guys want to come, Dan and Billy, or come up here with us?
Yeah, why don't you scoot over there?
We've got Billy Bounds, who is the senior paid fire officer for the Ocean Pines Fire Department, full-time staff. Dan Healy's president here for the fire department, so they're here to discuss anything fire department related, and that would be in tab 11. There's a modest increase at the bottom line last year, based 485. This year it's 507, so it's $21,000 difference year over year. And these two guys can certainly talk to you about any details. Page 2 actually gives a breakdown of their, how their revenue, where it comes in from, what their operating expenses are. So do you, how would you, yeah, no snuggling at the table, just hold and go.
You guys are in the fire business, when you bring a fire pit to warm those places up.
All right, where do you guys want to start with this? You guys have anything you want to start with, Bill?
Just happy to try to answer any questions, explain anything. I realize there are several new members of the board that I probably haven't met before. Maybe what we do is not completely clear with you guys. What the difference is between a paramedic or an EMT or what have you. So if there's any questions, please ask. If there's any specific questions about our numbers, folks are prepared to try to answer any of those. But basically, what we've tried to do this year is to try to provide the same good quality service that we always provide without much of an increase this year. We've come as close to doing that as we could. Be able to provide that same service. Not a lot of changes in the numbers this year. So, any questions?
I'll start. Okay. You're jumping your EMS billing from a forecasted this year 366 up to 415, which is quite a bit higher than 2014, not that much higher than 15. That's a big jump from what you're forecasting for the end of this year to next year. What's causing that huge jump? May not be huge.
The main reason for that is going over actual numbers for last year, which would be fiscal year 15. 14, 15, I guess. We, just to give you some background, we don't want all the background, tell me to just give you the number, and I will.
No.
But we can only bill for incidents that result in a transport to a hospital. Okay. So historically, I keep numbers. The numbers I brought with me today go back to 2010, 2011 fiscal year. Our total transports, which are billable transports, in those years were 865 for the year ending in 11, year ending in 12, 864, so identical. 974 for 2013, which was a 100 transport jump, which is a pretty significant increase for 1 year. 2015, we're back down to the 850s again, so about where we were staying, about where we had been. And then in 2015, we went from 853 the year before to 1,026. So couple hundred transports additional that year. Things are getting busier. So our projected, and I don't know that I have last year's, but what was the number you gave me for last year? For 385. We projected 385. Our actual, because of that increase in calls, was 405, 45, so 405,000. So $20,000 more. Looking at this year, from April 1st through December the 31st of the current budget year, we've got 636 transports that were billable transports. So projecting those numbers out, looking at what our average number of transports have historically been for January, February, March, and April, we're looking at being up again this year, not a 200 call transport increase, but probably 50 to 100 calls. So to check those numbers out, that's a number that should be fairly close to hitting
Now,
the mark.
is this part of the impact of having the extra ambulance that you guys put in place last year? Or?
I don't think the number of transports is an impact on having other ambulances. It could very well be. We have 3 ambulances in service.
Right.
Just like Eddie Wells at Public Works, every once in a while he has a dump truck go out of service.
Sure, right.
He has a back. So we have 3 ambulances in the hopes that we can always keep 2 of them on the road. So previous to having that 3rd ambulance, if we have one go down for mechanical problems, we only have 1 ambulance. Now we're having to rely on other places to come in. So now that we can keep 2 on the road all the time, could very well explain
that's
some
part of what's going on.
I really think more than that. I really think it's just the trend of people wanting the service or needing the service more and more every.
The population gets older. We need it.
Well, I think our mean age is what it is, but I think you also have a lot more younger people in the Pines now that are doing other activities that call for. A few years ago, I've been working here almost 15 years now. When I first came here, we never had a baby in Ocean Pines. That just didn't happen. We delivered a few babies in the last year, so you've got that younger population here now. Right. Children, things like that. So I think it's a combination of things. I don't want to get crucified by saying this because I don't have any numbers to back it up. I really think that part of our increase in calls, which is then coming back to revenue, part of it is the casino. If you're going to go to the casino, you almost have to come through Ocean Pines, our territory, to get there. We're running more accidents on 589 and Route 90 now than we ever had. I'm sure the police department probably can tell you the same thing, that they're having to do more on those highways. So I think that's part of what's impacted our call volume over the last couple of years.
You get compensated for that? That's county duty, right?
We just get our normal funding from the county. We don't get any extra impact fees because of that. I think you guys get some impact fees because of that.
But if you transport,
we transport, we do, yes.
To one more, then we'll open up.
Sure.
Capital reserves is up $40,000 from last year.
That was part of our calculation, Tom. We're looking at the reserves and the replacement cost. Billy and I actually look at the chart of all their assets.
No, I know the chart.
And you're familiar with it. And then what happens, we found based on the life cycle on a couple of those that we were, I don't want to say underfunding, but we weren't funding quite to the level where we could have been, so we've increased it to get it back evened up.
So we jointly did
Yes, Billy and I sat and talked about
all right.
it.
Tom, explain that.
Well, when we first started working with the fire department probably 4 or 5 years ago, part of what we did was put together a depreciation schedule for them and listing all of their major assets, and then utilizing formulas in that spreadsheet, taking into account inflation and replacement cost. It allows us to understand how much money they need to have in a particular year to pay for. It's kind of like reserve studies in some ways, of saying how much money are they going to need this year, next year, the next year, as their equipment ages and when the replacement's supposed to happen. And just like Ocean Pines, there are pieces that they keep beyond that. So every year you have to update this schedule. So that's basically what it does. It's basically a very succinct way of tracking all of the major equipment, its life cycle, and then putting money aside to be able to replace it at a replacement cost model as opposed to pure depreciation, which allows them to be a lot more ready for when they need something. Does that answer?
Yeah, and $40,000 increase, is that logical?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, from what I mean, again, I've just where it come from, and now I understand where it came from.
Thank you, because you probably should have much more eloquently than I. The only point that I would add to that is the schedule is updated on a yearly basis. It's not something that we come to when the time is getting short for a piece of capital apparatus and say, oh, we look like $100,000 short on something that we need to replace in 2 years. This is looked at the closer we get to the piece of capital apparatus fulfilling its useful life, the more we adjust that to what the figure is going to be. For example, in 2007, we purchased our ladder truck. It's probably the most expensive piece of equipment a ladder truck is the most expensive piece of equipment that we will ever own. At that time, the original cost was $762,000. That was a lot of money for a ladder truck. For any ladder truck, it costs that. The useful life of that ladder truck is 30 years. Myself, Bob, Tom was very instrumental in this. We have no idea in the year 2037 what a ladder truck is going to cost. So what we did was that year when that ladder truck went in service, if we had to replace this ladder truck right now, just paid. If we had to replace it right now, what would it cost to buy this ladder truck today? Because it took about 2 years of planning and all that to go into this. And at that time, we said, okay, $1 million. It's going to cost that much more. So about every 5 years, we look at that figure and say, if we were to replace this ladder truck today, based on one that Millville just bought or Ocean City just or wherever, what would that figure be? And we adjust that so that when time gets closer, we're not having to try to play catch up. We're trying to use numbers that are very realistic, so that there's no big impact to anybody. When it comes time to buy that new ladder truck in 2037, there shouldn't really be an issue of where are we going to get the money. Money's already here. We collectively have already put money aside in research. We don't have to come up where we're going to come up with $1 million from. If that makes sense to you guys.
You're familiar with English Council, Arbutus, Halethorpe Volunteer Fire, and all. You familiar with those guys?
Arbutus, yes.
Okay. I am too. And they told me years and years and years ago, when I was involved in the county, that when they go through the process that you just explained, they keep old equipment. They don't salvage it like we do. In other words, we get an old dump truck, we'll salvage it, replace it, and then salvage it. These guys were telling me they don't do that. They keep it in force, they keep it repaired, they keep it in active use. Is that the same thing here?
It depends on what the apparatus is. For example, a ladder truck, I probably at this point couldn't justify having 2 ladder trucks combined. We probably don't need that. So what we would be better off, like in the case of this ladder truck, selling it, trading it in, whatever, to offset some of the cost of new.
So you don't do what they do. You don't keep your equipment.
Not with everything. Now some things we repurpose. For example, if we had in 2009, we replaced an ambulance. We took that ambulance that was 10 years old. Really, it was not conducive to being an ambulance anymore.
Right.
We didn't just take it to the scrapyard and get $1,000 for it. We were in need of a fire police unit for our fire police to direct traffic and do things like that. So we repurposed it and used it that way. It operated as a fire police unit for several years until it just got to the point where maintenance versus cost of replacing it was costing us more to keep than it would have to get rid of. So we do repurpose things. But here in Ocean Pines, if it's time to replace an engine, we don't really need an additional engine. We don't have a place to keep it in the maintenance cost. Because we try to keep our equipment. We try to keep our equipment to the regulations that are set by the county. For example, county regulations say that the two newest pumpers cannot be more than 25 years old. But I only have two pumpers. I have pumper 1101 and I have pumper 1102. If one of them becomes 26 years old, I'm now not eligible for my county funding. I'm not meeting county regulations. So our replacement on our pumpers are 25 years. We have to.
Just curious, how many times did we use the ladder truck last year?
I don't have that number in front of me, but it goes out on every structural bill. And it's also part of our special operations. We use it for special operations. For example, a year ago in December, we had a confined space rescue down on Ocean Parkway, just past Mountain Creek Road. We used that to set up our anchor point to be able to bring this gentleman that had fallen 30 feet into a underground vault, to set our road rigging up to be able to bring him out. So it's not, when you think of the ladder truck, it's not just a big ladder. It's more than a tall ladder. It's a very big toolbox that carries a lot of specialized equipment for different types of incidents.
Any other questions for the fire?
If nobody else has any. Your salary and your payroll benefits, about $1 million, ballpark. How many people does that represent? How many employees does that represent?
All right. So for
Operating expense, you got salary, you got payroll, cost, benefits.
that is for, and I'm going to give it to you in a couple of different ways. Paramedics on the street, that is 11.9 full-time equivalents. Plus myself as a deputy chief, plus an administrative assistant. So if you want to say 14, it'd be 14 full-time equivalents. But of those full-time equivalents, one of those is an administrative assistant, does office work, things like that. I don't want you to think I've got 14 paramedics running.
Yeah, but that's EMS, right?
EMS and fire.
Oh, it's both.
They're firefighters.
Oh, okay. So you have a total of 14 employees.
14 full-time equivalents.
Okay.
And we accomplished that through, I have full-time staff, but then I also utilize part-time staff.
Now, are they in this?
Yes.
Are they in this salary?
Yes.
How many part-timers?
Well, it's a total of, it's 1.5 full-time equivalents. I pull about 10 part-time employees, but that pool of 10 part-time employees encompasses that 1.5
FTEs. So you're talking about 15 and a half total employees.
No, 14.
Still 14. The 1.5 is in that 14 number.
Yes.
Got it. Okay. Okay.
Any other questions for fire? Sure.
I'm just curious, your utility costs, $45,000. Do you anticipate that you'll get any positives associated with the sandpiper?
I do not, because we entered into a program with Sandpiper this past year where they put tanks in for us. We're getting a very reduced rate with propane, so I don't anticipate the fire department switching over to natural gas, since they've already given us such a, lack of a better word, a great deal on putting propane on site.
And so this $45,000 represents a reduced number that you were paying previously.
Correct. And I can't give you the number, not that I don't want to give you the number. It was it was a number that it was what I would consider to be a significant savings by this nonprofit plan that they call us. I don't know if it's technically called nonprofit. It was available to fire departments.
Anything else?
Guys, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Please remain available at some point if we have other questions.
Don't leave town.
You need to
Don't hop on.
I know. When you leave?
I think I'm going to leave early Friday morning now and try to chase the snow.
Be careful. Enjoy your trip.
Thank you.
That's right. I'll reach out. Dan will be around. I'll get.
I'm turning my phone off.
My captain is, I've already briefed my captain.
Harvey Booth, his name is.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Enjoy the opportunity.
Done. All right. Moving on tabs. Yeah, what we're going to do is go to the beach club. Golf is scheduled to be in at 11, so we'll be going, and then we'll go back to golf when they arrive. Okay? All right. Okay, beach club. We have
7 conversations.
all right. Beach club. We have an increase in revenue of approximately $56,000. No significant payroll changes. We have an increase in contract services. Downs.
Some entertainment, some satisfaction.
Yeah, the contract services with some of the increases, we have some entertainment cost increases and credit card. When you have more revenue, you have credit card expense increase as well. The actual capital expenditures were relatively small in that, replacement items, hot dog roll, display cabinet, freezer, things that just wear out over time. We did add, there is one new capital item in the budget, and that's for one more micros register. We have one register at the bar. It's on one end of it, and it creates some service issues with only having one there when it's really busy, so we've asked for a second register to be put on the bar.
Is it upstairs or
Downstairs.
Yes.
And I'd like to bring up something capital-wise. I went to do a little research. Went back to 2009, and the motion of the board of directors at that point to basically not address the need of bathrooms at the beach club, voting it down a unanimous vote. Artie Clark made the motion to not address that issue. I remember when I came on the board and toured that facility with Bob, it desperately needed to be cleaned and painted and all kinds of stuff. But quite frankly, a deep cleaning and a good coat of paint, changing the maintenance schedule can only take you so far. We have a proposal that was presented at the last board meeting for basically refurbishing, revamping, whatever word you want to use, for the facility where it currently exists. I have been very open in my concerns about rebuilding this at the same location because of dampness and access problems and challenges with steep steps and all that kind of thing. However, I do think this budget needs some money in it to begin to address the situation. I think these bathrooms ought to be addressed hopefully at a point where this board can be the one that does it. There's two ways of going at this. We can put money in the budget to pay for some engineering, which will allow us to truly understand the impact of building underground again, which is where we are now, versus going above ground, which was rejected before. I believe it was rejected, and this bid is already at least $100,000 more than the cost that was rejected in 2009.
That figure, you can't find that figure.
Yeah, I'm saying
I cannot find that figure.
What? I'm not here to argue, Jack.
I can't find the figure that.
What figure?
The figure of how much the bathrooms resurfacing of the parking lot are going to cost the association.
Again,
I've searched everywhere for it and I can't find it.
Yeah, you have to see it.
the issue, look, the bottom line to me is, in my opinion, we as a board need to take a look at this. It needs to be addressed.
You're right.
We need to, I don't think we should automatically assume that we rebuild where we are. I think we ought to study for various reasons, if nothing else, the drainage. A building or a location that is above ground will have better flow. This bid, as I read it, ties into the existing sewer system, which already has to be pumped out constantly in order for it to work. So I think I think it needs to be addressed. I think it ought to be studied. And I think we ought to ask the general manager and put money in the budget to pay for that study to be done so that we can understand what the options really are of refurbishing where we are, going above ground, what we can do, what makes sense. And so there's some options out there. I definitely believe we ought to address this. Okay? And in my opinion, we ought to put, at very minimum, we should put the engineering money in here to do the study with the understanding that when that report comes back later in this year, we have two options. We can either put money in the budget right now out of replacement reserves to do the work and estimate what that's going to be. Well, you have one number here. We don't know.
That's okay. That's the best, option we've had in a long time.
Where I'm coming from is, and I just said, we got two ways of going about this. We could put the engineering money in and 462 in the budget, and when the time comes, whatever the costs are, the board of directors can make the decision of what they do as far as fixing it. I don't think we should ignore it. I think we need to move forward, and I think that, but the best way of doing that at this point in my mind is at the bare minimum put the engineering dollars in here so that those reports and those options can be put forward for us as a board to decide. Putting a dollar amount in for the capital expenditure of the budget, its replacement reserves, doesn't affect the dues at this point. It also doesn't affect it if we don't put them in, because we can decide later. Now, I understand that would be spending unbudgeted dollars, but the understanding is one of the arguments we've had around here is you don't throw out numbers that may not even end up being close. Because when I looked at this, again, and I've read every word of it, of what was presented, there are issues in here having to do with, tying directly into existing sewer lines. That's what this bid calls for. So for the 462 that's here, is probably very valid for the work that is here. But how much other work is there that has to be done to get those sewers to work? All I'm asking for us to do is, as a board, insert into this budget the engineering dollars, bare minimum, that maybe $25,000 it would cost to actually come up with options for us so that we can get back a real solid number to work from and the real options that are there. So that's my take on this, and hopefully that's kind of a middle ground for us to move forward.
100% for that.
Yep. Well, hold on. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
You started.
No, you got it.
As we've been going through these tabs, we have been talking about capital items, and I believe, had agreed that we were going to hold off on all of those things until we got to haven't had. We're also missing reserve study information we don't have yet and other things. So I don't think this is the appropriate time for us to make a decision about what you just proposed. Because what we talked about
That's fair.
was
Oh, that's
Fair,
fair.
fair
The only
enough.
reason I brought it up is because we did have this report.
But let me say this,
And I want to
Tom.
respond.
I really appreciate your open-mindedness on this. I mean, that's very mature of you.
Gee, I grew up.
And he can tell you that because he's a lot older than you
That's
are.
right. That's right.
Back
All right.
No, it's not a backhanded compliment.
There's a backhanded
compliment.
You yelled at me last week when
I did not.
yelled at me.
I did
and I
not. I
was doing
did.
just that.
I just
You yelled
spoke
at
a
him.
higher tone. That's all. That's not
All right,
yelling.
can I say something?
Yes. Go ahead, Dick.
I was there when it all happened, but 2007, so 2009.
Right.
So when we did it, and, the only thing I want to add is that we did go out for proposals to build above ground bathrooms. You know? The prices, as I recollect, and probably was in $300,000,
That's what I've heard.
$450,000 range, something like that. We had been looking at $200 price, decided that we would accused of building both houses. And there were other issues too about ground where they knew where they would be, but how they. But at any rate, that's when the board decided to stop. Not
Again, the minutes of the meetings clearly called for they had other places they needed to spend the money. You know, God knows there were lots of things that needed to be addressed. So my comments about 2009 were not negative
And
to
the
that board.
589 fiasco.
Yeah.
They-
Yeah, that's right. It
Now,
wasn't
by the
negative
way-
to them at all. It's just that's where this kind of. And my point was, you can only take paint and fix up and changing maintenance. It'll only take you so far,
Yeah,
and that's kind of where we are.
There were two different issues back then. I think it's important now to keep them separate. Parking lot was a separate
I agree.
issue.
Yeah.
We had permitting issues, permeability issue. We did get some proposals to do that. And you had a study. I don't know, Soleil or something else. Yeah. All I'm saying is that one of the starting things for this study ought to be to get the information that we have that we didn't want.
Totally agree.
Because in that regard, I think nothing has changed.
It could very well be right, except prices. But you know, again,
Prices
to
may be-
Cheryl's point, we'll pick it up again.
Yeah.
When we get to capital. You know, I just when we had this in front of us, I read it again last night, thinking about it, and went, okay, how do we go after this?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Tom.
What?
Go
Remember him
ahead.
yelling at me last week?
Yeah, I remember him yelling at you. Yeah, I remember.
Where do you think he got the idea? You. Because he was standing there next to you after you yelled at him. Why do you have to yell at you?
Did Jack yell?
Jack yelled?
Because he wanted this thing, just sign it, write a check.
All right. Can we
Break.
Oh, break.
Can we get through parking and then a break?
I'm good with that.
Let's get through parking.
We'll do parking.
and take a break. I rented some coffee.
Parking and break.
Nice. Okay. Parking, slight increase in revenue, no significant change. Payroll side of the house. This is the area.
Part of the money goes
Yeah,
around.
I'm waiting for Cheryl to jump in on this one. Where'd the
Come on, Cheryl.
I was
Come
already
on.
mumbling.
I
was
figured
already
you were
Mumbling down there, Cheryl.
I said to save money on not being able to use my test.
That's right.
Can I make a motion that this lady be reimbursed for her expense over the last, 5 years now?
No.
You're 23 present.
We looked into it. Just we're going to talk to Cheryl after. The meeting.
We'll fix that.
We'll take care.
Apparently I'm a special.
Apparently.
That's enough of that.
And, all right. Are there any other
Play
questions
nice in the
here?
sandbox.
The next tab will be Yacht Club, but we'll take a 5-minute break. Or till, yeah.
Yeah, we got time.
But now,
Jackson.
is an example of